I'm Brett Michael Phillips from MIT, and I'm here to talk to you today about the number one reason why your life isn't awesome. Or, if you're more of a glass half empty kind of person, the number one reason why your life still sucks. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of factors that influence how our lives turn out. How many subconscious blocks we have, our internalized fears, habits of procrastination, low self-esteem, risk averseness, and unwillingness to delay gratification. There's a lot of factors, but the number one factor that I think is more important than any of those things is what I would call your connection to the quantum field. So what does that mean? Well, it's interesting. We have a lot of different words and terms for what I would call this quantum field effect. We call it presence. We call it grace. We call it charisma. We call it being connected or dropped in or in the flow or in the zone. And when you are very connected to the life force around you, life tends to break your way. If I had to pick one word that most closely and accurately correlates to this quantum field connection, it would be luck. Because we all know some people just seem to be naturally lucky. Things tend to break their way. They tend to get away with a lot that others don't. That things just tend to show up in their life when they need them. And this is not just some esoteric concept. It's not some mathematical curiosity. We can actually feel this in our bodies. If you look at great performers, as an example, I love music. I would call out great performers like Freddie Mercury or David Bowie. You can really feel that there's something special about them. These are the kind of people that they walk into a room and you don't even know they're there because you can't see them, but you feel it. You turn and look. You know something just happened. So if you want your life to work out better, for things to break your way, we got to get you reconnected to the quantum field. So first I want to give you some hints and clues how to know when you're disconnected. How do we determine that this is part of our problem? Well, one is, do you spend your life working hard, doing all these things to try to manipulate and force the universe to give you what you want? Whether it be money, or sex, or fame, or security, or health, or relationships, or purpose. Those are all wonderful things. The trouble is when we're constantly scheming and planning from the mind, trying to manipulate to make sure we get this or avoid that. That's a giant red flag that you're disconnected from the quantum field. And if living that way is working for you, awesome. Don't let me stop you, right? Don't let me get in the way of that. But most of us find we spend years and decades manipulating, scheming, planning, trying to make things go our way, only to come away disappointed, frustrated, exhausted. Do you ever find that you do a lot of work, create a lot of value, but things tend to fall apart at the last minute? Do you find that you will go and do something amazing and someone else gets the reward and credit for what you did? These are all symptoms that you're disconnected from the quantum field. On the flip side, when you're very connected to the field, things will tend to break your way. Life will be full of unexpected surprises and gifts. As an example, the first time I traveled with my late mentor Carl, we were both going to Boston on the same flight. And we lived not too far from each other, so we figured, what the heck, let's share a ride to the airport and we can talk on the plane, right? So we were going to go travel together. And we went to LAX, and we were there probably 90 minutes before our flight, should have been plenty of time. And we got in the security line. And oh my God, I've never seen such a long security line at the airport. There must have been hundreds of people in it. It went all the way through the little barricades they have and halfway down the terminal. And we got in the back of the line, and I'm all freaking out. Oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. We're going to miss our flight. I've wasted all this money, blah, 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 right? Going right down the rabbit hole. And Carl was like, well, Brent, let's just see what happens. And less than 10 minutes later, a lady in a TSA uniform came up to us and said, to Carl specifically, and said, excuse me, sir, I can take you and your party through the VIP check-in if you'd like. And he was all, oh, that would be wonderful. And I'm thinking he knows her. I figure, oh, maybe she's seen him on TV, or maybe she's a client, or maybe a friend of his family. I figured there was some connection. So we go through the security line. A couple minutes later, we're going out to wait for our flight. And I asked Carl, I'm like, hey, Carl, how did you know her? That was pretty awesome. And he goes, oh, no, Brent, I don't. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, that kind of thing happens to me all the time. That's what I'm talking about, folks. Another great example of something that really happened. I went over to see him one time for a private session, and before the session he said, Brent, check out this letter. And he showed me a handwritten letter from one of his students from 2 years ago that had gone through his intensive program. That is the basis for what I call my Awakening Intensive today. Phenomenal program. And it was a thank you note that said something like this: hey Carl, I just wanted you to know your intensive program absolutely transformed my life. And it's worth so much more than what I paid. I know you only charged us $15,000, so here's some extra money. Thank you so much. And enclosed with the letter was a check for $30,000. No joke. One of his students sent him an extra $30,000 because they were so grateful. Why? He had helped them reconnect to the quantum field. This is enormous. On the flip side, if you're disconnected from the field, if you're living in the mind, you'll find yourself trying to constantly manipulate and scheme and plan. You'll try to find the perfect system for the stock market. You'll try to find the perfect system for energy healing. Well, that doesn't work so well. And I want to explain to you how we get reconnected. But first, I want to pause for a second and say, if you like this, and I think you do because you're still here, right? Make sure you go click like. Make sure you go click subscribe. I've got some other awesome videos on this subject coming out very soon. You don't want to miss it. So awesome, go smash those buttons. And as a thank you, as a reward for liking and subscribing, here's an awesome picture of outer space. All right, cool. So what happens when you're disconnected? Well, here's an example. Back when I left MIT in the 90s, I really was one of the world's leading internet experts. One of my startups was an online game company, and I created a game that was literally 10 years ahead of the rest of the market. For those that are a little geeky, I created a real-time, persistent state, three-dimensional, massively multiplayer role-playing game, years ahead of when anyone else thought it was possible. And it ran on a 386 with 16 megabytes of RAM on a 14.4 modem. Almost impossible. This technology really was considered a holy grail at the time. No one else knew how to do it, but I cracked the nut. And I built a game company around it. And there was a point where we had a deal with a French publisher. They were going to give us $3 million to develop this game. And so I had my fax machine set up at home. I actually brought it home from the office so that when the fax came in with a signed contract, I could turn it around immediately. So long story short, about 5 in the morning, I get woken up by the fax machine. Contract comes in. I immediately execute it, turn it around, fax it back. I email my partners, guys, we did it. We have our contract. Let's meet tomorrow. We'll find office space. We need to flesh out the team, et cetera, right? So I was so excited. Well, later in the day, I got an email from our attorneys. They said, sorry, Brent. Between the time they had faxed you the contract and when you sent it back, they had convened an emergency meeting of their board of directors. And they fired the CEO and eliminated their entire game division. And it didn't really matter that we had a signed contract. My attorneys told me, well, Brent, you can try to litigate it, but it's in Europe, and we're going to want at least a $100,000 retainer to move forward. And they just recommended I let it go. So that's an example of what happens when you're living in your mind, when you're disconnected from the quantum field. You can have incredible talent, exert enormous effort, create huge value, but things tend to fall apart. Every time you think you're just about to make a big breakthrough, something happens and drags you back. So what can we do about this? Well, I'm going to give you a short answer right now and a much longer answer in a couple other videos coming later in this series. Short answer is, we gotta first wake you up. As long as you're carrying around this old idea of you as a separate being, you're kind of stuck. It's really difficult living from the ego. So awakening is the first step, and ironically, awakening happens in the mind. It's not something that happens in the body, the heart. It's a mental understanding. But after that, we need to embody. We need to literally get consciousness back into your body. Because all of our negative thoughts, developmental traumas, our fears, they squeeze the consciousness out of our body. And it's this consciousness that is our connection to the quantum field. I think of it like a tube of toothpaste. When we're born, we're like a full tube of toothpaste. We're full of consciousness. Babies, infants are almost always incredibly powerfully connected to the quantum field. And it's interesting, the only experience I've ever had with someone that was as connected as my late mentor was when my son was a newborn baby. Fully present, completely connected to the field. It was really an amazing thing to see. But he lost it so quickly, and it's not his fault. It's the mass consciousness. It's the energy of our world. So we got to get that toothpaste back in the tube. Why? Every trauma, every negative thought, every failure, every setback squeezes out some of that toothpaste. And we got to get the toothpaste back in the tube. We got to get the consciousness back in your body. That's how we reconnect to the quantum field. How do we do this? It starts with awakening. Energy healing, subconscious clearing is a good start, but it on its own is not enough. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in our next video. What really works over the long term is beaming energy, quantum field entrainment, as well as movement feedback holography. That's how we get the toothpaste back in the tube. That's how we reconnect you to this field of life and intelligence. And it's weird. When you get reconnected, things get easier. I just had a session the other day with one of my advanced students, and he said, Brent, I don't get it. My work didn't change. The number of hours in the day didn't change. But I'm more relaxed, and it seems I'm getting more done. I'm not as stressed. Fewer things are going wrong. That's what happens when we get reconnected. And that's exactly what I want you to experience. So if you haven't done so yet, go click like, go click subscribe. Awesome, good for you. I'm going to throw up on the screen the URL for my spiritual power quiz. And this is important because if you haven't done it yet, you want to know your spiritual power. But more importantly, anyone that does the spiritual power quiz, I'm going to give you a free ticket to a live online session where I'm going to do these things with you. Quantum field entrainment, beaming with energy, movement feedback holography. Because you got to experience this for yourself. Don't take my word for it. See for yourself how real and new and powerful this is. That's all I got to say for today. I'm Brent Michael Phillips signing off, and I hope to see you in my next video and at one of my live events very soon. Until then, take care and namaste.